All right, well, welcome everybody. Thank you for being here. Today we have Rachel. She's going to be sharing with us some of her background and information and just kind of guiding us through her professional journey. So I think we're going to learn a lot. So I have a short bio for her, which I'm going to read. So just ignore if I stumble upon some of these words, I hope not. But Rachel is a consultant at a mid-sized firm called North Highlands, and she specializes in change management consulting. She has a non-traditional path to consulting and began her career as a mental health clinician. She decided to pursue her PhD in IO psychology due to wanting to affect change at a higher level with nonprofit organizations, which I love because that's a little bit of how I got into IO too. So love that. And she also volunteers with Latinos in IO psychology and with her internal Latino business resource group. So welcome. Thank you for making the time to be here. So I know I read your bio. So can you just kind of give us a little snapshot of how you got here, what influenced you to get into IO? How did you find out about IO? Just so kind of we get an idea of your path, if you don't mind.
Yeah, thanks, Gabby, for having me, and so excited to meet everybody here on the call. So me, like I feel like many others, started with the undergrad degree in psychology, and they talked about IO psychology, and then they talked about all the clinical stuff, and a lot of the times those professors are more aligned with like the clinical field, at least from my experience. So IO was really glossed over and it was like, oh yeah, and then if you care about making money, there's IO and they do a lot with numbers, and I was like, oh, numbers, like I don't like that. So I never really was interested at all in IO, and took the clinical route and got my master's, and then just kept working for these organizations that would like grow out of need, and they would expand, and then they had this like good small culture, but then they grew and they were bigger, and then they would lose their culture along the way. I'm like, what is happening here?
Mhm.
And then I had a clinical supervisor who also had his PhD in industrial and organizational psychology. So that kind of sparked the conversation. And we would talk about, how would we make the workplace better? And I was like, I kind of like this stuff. Like, I think this is what I need to be getting into. And so I started studying, started my PhD program. And then I was still very deep and entrenched in the clinical field and in the nonprofit world. And I was like, how do I make that jump? Like, how do I transition from having this work experience? Like, how much does this work experience weigh, in the clinical, or excuse me, in the IO world? Like, I wasn't sure how transferable my skills were. I didn't even know what really positions I should be applying for when I was done with school. I'm like, am I entry level? Like, am I mid level? Like, I had no idea. And then it was really hard, I feel like, because I wanted to get into consulting. And so, what I didn't realize was that there were so many firms
Mhm.
that I would think, the smaller places would take in the newer people and train you up and help you. But then I learned it was the opposite. It was the bigger firms that actually had the wiggle room and space to take on newer people,
Mhm.
and teach them. So I was applying to the wrong companies for like about half a year
Oh,
until
wow.
I figured that part out. And then I started getting into, once I got enough denials, I was like, okay, I need some experience, so I started getting out there and interning and just talking to people and figuring out, how did you get to where you are? How do I get there? And in those conversations, I did end up landing some internships
Mhm.
along the way, which gave me that first like consulting experience that I was able to um, leverage, as well as translating the skills from my previous workplaces, into language that was more acceptable for the corporate world.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know. I I relate to a lot of what you went through. And that's interesting because I hadn't met someone that had a similar path to me. So this is really cool because a lot of our speakers before have had experiences, and everybody has a very diverse background. Everybody kind of stumbles up on IO and transitions. But I like that you kind of struggle to figure out, how do I get into this field that is so vast? I mean, there, even just finding a job, what is it that you got to be looking for? So my question is, did you have any guidance? Did anything help while you were trying to figure things out, or were you just kind of going with the flow and ended up finding your place?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't like I had, 5 million opportunities at my door, that like I just had this choice of, so I really was trying to figure out how do I narrow down even the job titles that I was interested in and that I wanted to get into and work that I wanted to do. I knew that I wanted to get into consulting mostly because prior to that, I was a crisis clinician, which is pretty like intense work, especially through the pandemic. So I knew I wanted something that wasn't internally facing because I felt like I was going to get bored really easily. Or what if I don't like them that much? And then I'm like stuck with them internally. So I was like, I wanted something that was a little more external facing where I might have different people coming through different opportunities, and so I knew consulting was the path that I was going down, but within consulting there's so many options even. And so honestly, I was just networking, I was connecting with people, and I just kept that going, which I know can be hard when you're already like still studying or writing like your dissertation or your thesis, and you're like working, and then now you have this other extra part-time job where you're like reaching out to people, and then some people just don't answer you, or some people answer you, but they don't schedule with you. So it's like out of the 50 messages you sent, like 10 are like response, and then like 2 you actually meet with. But it's a lot of work, but I would say that for myself, it paid off because the networking I did at PsyOp that first year, and going to PsyOp was a big part of like with Latinos in IO because they literally called me and were like, what are you doing? It's in Seattle and you live in Portland. Like, why are you not coming? Like, you better come. And I'm like, okay, fine. Like, bought a super last minute ticket, like went. So glad I did, because I networked with so many people. Somebody posted the job application or the job posting that I had met. And then that's how I ended up with my first role at the first consulting firm that I ended up with. And then after a year, a little over a year with them, I was poached by my current consulting firm. And so that was just having an updated LinkedIn and, posting stuff, I guess, and having all of my information on there that it led them to reaching out to me, and then me getting this next role at another firm. So I say the networking works, the LinkedIn works, like, and some for me, it's just been the happenstance and opportunities that have showed up for me.
That's amazing. And that is one of the reasons why I started this, because right after graduating from my master's program, I'm a first generation to begin with. And then I had no clue that we needed to do internships and that we needed to do networking and that we needed to look for a job. I mean, all of the things that are common sense, I didn't know. And I didn't have a lot of guidance into how to get a job afterwards. Like in my naive mind, I thought I'll graduate and then I'll just apply somewhere, or jobs are just going to come up and I'm going to have a job. And I think it was for a couple months after graduation, and even before graduating, I had a conversation with a career advisor, and he said, you probably should start thinking about internships and before you graduate. And I was like, wait, what? Like, what? I got to do those things too? And because I came from, I've done addictions for a long time. And I knew that therapists have to do internships, but I never thought in my wildest dreams that someone in IO would have to do something like that as well, just to get some experience and just to get yourself out there. And I think also the informational interviews, which was something that he recommended, I found him really helpful too, because I met a lot of people and I got to narrow down what I wanted to do. And it really does help guide what kind of job you want to do, what kind of companies you want to work for. And I feel kind of like a little bit like you, like I was thinking that I wanted to do, but it was backwards. I was thinking that I wanted to do the bigger companies and the big four
Mhm.
and all of that. And then I got to talk to some people and I was like, oh, I don't think that's for me. I think
Yeah.
I'm a smaller kind of smaller kind of place for me. And that's kind of where I found myself. And um, one thing led to the other, and I've been able to have some good opportunities, but it has been a roller coaster trying to figure out now you get this degree, now what do you do with it?
Hmm.
So it's definitely been a lot. Did you ever found anyone that you were like, okay, that's the person, that's the kind of job that I want to do? Or did you, before graduating, did you already have an idea that change management was what you wanted to do?
Oh, no idea. Like,
Right.
yeah, so also first gen, and I feel like
Oh,
a lot
good.
of the things that I've learned has been through trial and error,
Hmm.
through the informational interviews, and honestly, like TikTok videos, like Reels on Instagram, and like people, sharing career advice. I was ready to apply all of it because I applying for so many roles and really not putting out a really good, like tailored resume for
Hmm.
those positions. I wasn't getting called back, for those kind of jobs. And it's really disheartening. Like when, at least for me, when I was going through that, big transition, I was like, I have good experience. I'm not starting, like, I'm not new to the job field, to the job market. So I really learned that and especially being in positions where I did have connections, and then there was like, a role or something opened up, and then people were like, oh, yeah, you've got it, and I'm like, but I haven't gone for it yet. Like, I haven't interviewed, I hadn't done, and they're like, and I'm like, oh, this is the thing. This is the thing where people just like bring in the people they know, or the people that they're close with, or the people
Yeah.
that they're connected with. And I'm like, okay, like, this is why we do these things. Like, this is why we network, because that's usually the first choice that, gets in. And so, um, I've gotten surprisingly far in interviews, even with the firms that were smaller. And I wasn't chosen at the end for the lack of experience, but I really got all of those interviews just networking with people, having informational interviews, and be like, oh, I talked to Kim or I talked to Karen. And so people kind of assume, like, oh, they must know each other well. And it's like, no, like she just met with me for like 30 minutes, but that's okay. You can think that and then like push me forward so I can like give you an opportunity to like show you what I'm capable of.
Hmm.
And so it really was a lot of the conversations and connections that were able to, get me into those roles. But not knowing that I wanted to go into change, stumbling into change with that, posting of the position, reading about it, and being like, yeah, no, this is like right up my alley. Like, I really like what this is. And um, what this role entails. And then now I'm at a firm where I am really a generalist. Like, I have my change management experience,
Hmm.
and that's kind of like where my expertise lies. But right now I'm working as a project manager, like on a program assessment. So it's really cool to be able to have the opportunities to try new things,
Hmm.
and have different roles and different titles and work in different industries,
Hmm.
because my company now, has services in retail, transportation, a lot of areas that I wasn't really touching before. Um, so it's been cool to not have such a set path, and
Hmm.
leaving that open road, and seeing what I learn, and what I gather along the way.
And before I forget, Maria and Jamie, if you guys have any questions, you can pop in, raise your hand, just wave at me if you want to say something. This is an open conversation, so just please feel welcome to just join in or put it in the chat, whatever you feel most comfortable with. Okay, so as a first gen, navigating the workforce, navigating the professional space, and I mean, I'm sure, well, I'm not going to assume, I'm going to tell you about my background. Um, where I come from, there wasn't a lot of conversation around, uh, I was told you can dream big, but there was never a specific like, oh, you can dream big and be this. you can dream big and achieve this. It was just like, yeah, dream big and do what you can to achieve your goals. But it was always so vague. And I found myself feeling very unmotivated and just discouraged sometimes because it felt like I wasn't getting anywhere. So, what do you think were some of the motivators that helped you keep moving forward and doing all of the uncomfortable things? Because networking, when you start doing these informational interviews, they're awkward. And at least for me, because I'm an
Mhm.
introvert and I was like, I don't know how to do this. I've never done it before. I didn't know anybody close to me that had
Mhm.
ever done anything like that. Like up until this day, my family's still like, what do you even do? Kind of
Uh-huh, yep.
so, so it's one of those things that you kind of just navigate on your own. So what were some motivators or what helped you through those difficult times?
Yeah. I think for myself, I've really just always been driven to want to work the least amount of time and make the most amount of money to like enjoy my life. Like I think that's like my dream or my goal. And so I would love to do my own consulting on my own, but I know that there's so much to learn along
Mhm,
the way. And so that's part of the reason why I've got into consulting is to learn and also learn from other companies' mistakes, right? And but also learn those different kinds of skills, business development, like that's not something that a tool I ever got to sharpen, like working in the nonprofit space.
mhm, mhm,
And so that's like a new thing that I'm learning now. I'm getting to apply and get into. And so I think always having that final picture of what I want in the end, as well as just certain comforts in life,
mhm,
um, that I've wanted. Like I love traveling, and I love eating. And so anything that's going to help me, be able to do those things and push towards those goals. Um, I would also say like the people that you keep and the friends that you have around. I've always had a really good support group
mhm,
of other people that were students, so we could just complain to each other like that we're working full time and in
mhm,
school full time, like for how many years of our lives. And, we can complain about that together and feel it together and cancel on plans because we have, to turn in chapters or things like that. But there was always that like mutual understanding and like support,
mhm,
which I think was helpful for me, especially being a remote learner
mhm,
through my PhD program. It was really easy to be isolated and not having, maybe people in my household like fully understanding like what I was going through with school, but then
mhm.
having other people around that I could reach out to that were in the same kind of struggle.
That's awesome. We had talked, I can't remember in which meetup now, but we talked about the importance of having community and finding people that are like-minded and that are working towards something, maybe not the same thing, but that you can relate to, especially. And that was one of the conversations when we were talking about the doctorates, having people that know what it feels like, that know what the struggle is like, and I think it was one of the students that shared like having kind of like what you're saying, having someone who understands. It's just such a relief that you just feel heard and seen and they understand the struggle.
Mhm.
How do you think your clinical background helps you today with what you're doing?
Oh, I'm so thankful for it. I mean, just like going into like for example, I do a lot of interviews as a change management consultant, and so I'm doing interviews with clients and trying to gather information, and I'm able to open a conversation with anyone, and then find some commonality and like get things things feel comfortable, kind of build that rapport, have that conversation with them, and then like ask follow-up questions and kind of guide it, and it's like comfortable and then it's done, and other people are like, okay, I'm just going to read the questions off the sheet and then like be done, and you don't get the same result or the same, I guess like smoothness through it. And then also just in change management there's a lot of emotions. Like I've worked through like kind of hostile acquisitions and takeovers, within organizations, or organizations that were not doing something well. And then now another like company's coming in and they're like, you were doing everything wrong and like now we have to do it different, and you have you have those people in a room, and there's going to be some uncomfortable feelings.
Mhm.
And if you don't ever let any of that air out or share, so a lot of people are kind of scared to open the floor and moderate something like that, and
Yeah.
have those kind of conversations about like, hey, when you guys say this kind of thing, like it makes us feel like we did everything wrong and that feels really bad for us and we're supposed to be on the same team now, and allows the other person to the other company realize like, oh, okay, yeah, like I hear that, I'm sorry, like we can do better about that. And then now there's like cohesion and like people can work together and move forward. But I've left so many rooms, virtual rooms literally, and had people be like, oh my God, that was horrible. I never want to like moderate a conversation like that again. And I was like, really? It was that bad? Like, so there's a lot of things that I take from the clinical side that are really helpful, I think,
Mhm.
in change management, because change is hard and, there's a lot of feeling behind change for a lot of people.
Yeah. I think that was one of the things that really got my attention for IO was seeing how a lot of, because I live in rural New Mexico, south of the state, and we have very limited resources. So even before I realized what IO was, I was already interested in figuring out why are we closing our resources? Why can't we keep people and our community suffering and they don't get to have access to what we could have, but we don't because our culture is just so chaotic and it's just so toxic and unhealthy that we're having to do all of this changes and close down. Um, in addition to funding, which funding is a big deal for the nonprofits, as you may know.
Mhm.
So once I figured out, okay, so you can definitely bring in all of those skills that the listening, the communication, and rephrasing what other people are saying, reading between the lines of how people
Mhm.
interact with each other. I think that's one of like, I call it my superpowers because it's true. Like once you,
Right.
hey, sorry, once you, all right, you're able to kind of learn those skills, I feel like it makes your job so much easier. And even like in my role right now, I do institutional research and data analysis for higher education. Sometimes conversations when we're implementing new platforms or new anything, they can get a little bit heated. And I think that's a really cool thing to have to be able to say, okay, I hear you. Let's really move this conversation to a different tone. And to be able to
Mhm.
do that, I think it's one of the biggest like things that I'm also thankful for counseling because you're not afraid of the uncomfortable. You're just
Right.
like, let's just jump in. Let's just talk about
Mhm.
it out there. And
No,
I
keep
hear
going,
your
keep going.
feedback.
Let's hear it. Air it out. Let's go.
Yep, yep. And it's such a cool thing. Um, so how did you how did you manage the transition from counseling to consulting? Was it something that you felt like, okay, I'm definitely ready to do this consulting work, or did you have to do some prep work? Any, I don't know, how did you get from point A to point B? Um,
Yeah, so I knew when I was ready to commit to getting into this new field, I went part-time. Well, I went on call at my last job, which luckily I was able to like only do some shifts or pick up more shifts if I needed to, depending on the month and the bills and everything
mhm,
that had to get done. Um, and then use that extra time to seek out those, internships, and start on those projects that sometimes would have, periods of time where they were more work to be done, and then some periods of time where there was less.
mhm,
And also was applying for jobs at
mhm,
that same time, using that information on my resume and really reaching out there. It did take me a little bit of time to figure out, like I mentioned, the which sized firms that I needed to be applying for and going for. And then once all of that worked out, I think I finished my dissertation in November, and then I started my new role probably mid-year the next year. So yeah, so I was still working part-time in the clinic, and then I was working part-time doing part-time at a like startup consulting firm. So that was where I was until I was offered that first role. But a lot of the transition included, you know, changing the wording in my resume and then also changing my brain. Because in the brain and the clinical side, you know, you're really looking at a lot of the soft skills, the way that you're representing yourself, and you know, your certifications or things like that, or experiences that you have. And then now changing that frame to, you know, the bottom line, quantifying your experience. You know, I was managing X number of clients, you know, on this, then, and this percentage of utilization and whatever, you know, that kind of language was what I had to shift to. And it was really hard to write it because I'm like, I don't know, like, what's the number? Like, I've never counted these things. But also thinking about, you know, I worked in crisis, so I would be out in the field and I was literally, you know, crisis planning with police, with parents, with schools, like with hospitals, like all of these people, I'm project managing them, right? So it's like really reframing how we think about things. Also, what was at stake was a lot higher, you know, in the clinic. So I was really trying to change and reframe, okay, what would this look like from a, you know, business perspective or a corporate perspective? And what are going to be things that really call to them? And I would say that I'm still going through that transition. I'm now 2 years into the corporate world. Yeah, like 2 years in. And so, for example, I was in a meeting with a woman and she was telling me, or she was asking me about my previous experience at my last firm. And I was like, yeah, I had like 10 to 12 clients at the same time, where now as I'm working like full time with one client, she was like, wow, that's so different from our model. I'm like, yeah. And she's like, by the way, I can't give you like unsolicited advice. I'm like, yes, like any day, please tell me. And she's like, you were managing a portfolio of clients, you know, giving me the language and the verbiage that I needed in order to really show, you know, the level that I'm at and what experience I have, and making me sound more impressive. And then also, but I mean, it's experience I had, I just don't know how to say it. So I think always seeking mentorship, always seeking that feedback. And then always, I think I always find my people, like wherever I'm working, so that I can ask those questions. Like you mentioned, you know, being first gen, there's a lot of like unspoken rules that you don't know about. And I'm the kind of person where I'm like smiling it, like fake it till I make it, like in spaces that I'm like, I don't feel like I belong here, but it helps to have other people. You know, I had a golf trip that I had to go to for work. And I texted my friend, I was like, all of the secret rules of golf that like you don't know, like that are not written anywhere that I need to know, like go, like tell me. He's like, all right, and like made me a list. Like, and I was like, okay, cool. Like, you know, those are the kind of people that you want in your corner, and like conversations that you want to have, and people that are going to be like, hey, you're telling me something really important, and like for you to get promoted, you should say it like this. You know, those are the people you want around.
I really like that because it's true. It really changes the game for you when you start to associate yourself with people that are willing to help you, that like people that are just happy to help you grow and see you grow. That's one of the things that I've really liked about the SEBOC community. I like SciUp. I haven't made it to a conference just yet. I was going to this year, but I ended up not to because life happened. But that's something that I do want to do in the future. But with SEBOC, I feel like I've been able to reach out to like people and have conversations and just really learn from other people that are doing the thing, that have been in the field for whatever amount of years, and how they present themselves. And you're right, like the way you communicate about what you've done changes completely the way that people see you and how they perceive you, especially like job interviews. Last year, I had an interview with a company that I've been trying to get into for years. and I finally got an interview, and I went through like all the steps, and I was not prepared. Like the way I presented myself, the way I shared my background and all of the things that I had done was not in a way that impressed them. It was impressive to me because I mean, coming from where I come from, I hadn't done any of that. And I was like, look at all the things that I've done. And then they're like, cool. So, and of course, it was a big company, so that we come across a lot of different professionals.
Mhm.
And I was like, dang. So I ended up not getting the job. Fast forward to this year, they ended up reaching out because I stayed in contact and I tried to make a good impression. And even though I feel like that interview was just completely horrible for me, I learned a lot, and it felt really awful afterwards because I was like, dang, like I really didn't feel prepared. And what I thought was going to be was definitely not. I started to educate myself, like, how do you do group interviews for this type of work, and how do you present yourself? And fast forward, I was able to get another interview with them this year, and I finally got a contract. So I'm in a transition moment right now, trying to get
Congrats.
all that. Thanks, but it really does make a difference. And the way that I presented myself this time, I mean, they were just like, "Oh, okay, yeah, you've done it. Okay, wow." And I'm like, "That's literally what I said last year," but it just the way that I presented myself was so different. And
Mhm.
I think the level of confidence, I think, increased a little bit too, because I was like,
Mhm.
okay, I think I know what I'm doing this time.
Right.
And last time, if it wasn't for all of the people that have helped and all the interviews that I've done, I think I wouldn't have been able to do what I did this past
Mhm.
couple months, because it really does make a difference.
Oh
So
yeah.
I'm really
I mean,
proud.
a year is crazy how much you learn. Like the firms that I had interviewed with, I probably would get the job with them now. But it took them denying me for me to learn, like, okay, like there's still more for me to learn. Like I'm not at the point where I'm selling myself for this kind of role yet. But then fast forward a year, it's like, oh, well, that wasn't that hard to learn, but now here I am and I'm ready for it. So yeah, a lot can happen in a year. Congrats.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that the willingness to be uncomfortable, that was one of the things that getting out of like grad school, I thought, well, now I got this paper, jobs are just going to be thrown at me. And no, like it's the wild, wild west trying to get a job after any kind of graduation, after any kind of
Yeah.
milestone in your life. And I think also that made a difference. And I'm curious because I got to ask everybody that has a doctorate gets this question. Why did you decide to go for a doctorate after your master's degree? What was your reason behind that?
I mean, I always wanted to be the first Doctor Hernandez. Like that was it.
Yeah.
That was literally it. Like
I feel like this
I want,
purely entitlement.
yeah, literally just wanted the title, y'all. That's it. Like
I love that. Yes.
that was it. Yeah. I mean, I even got married like before then, and everyone's like, "You're not taking his last name." And I'm like, "No, because I'm not done with my doctorate, and I'm gonna be Doctora Hernandez. Like that's it."
Mhm,
Like
mhm.
so
I
yeah,
love that.
that was the reason why I did it. Also like for the higher pay,
Mhm,
and just also I think a little bit of like proving it to myself,
mhm.
that I was able to do it, and yeah, here I am. Lots of writing later, and I'm not a writer. So if I could do it, y'all could do it.
Yes. I know we had talked about like having a reason for getting the doctorate because it's a lot of work. It's just takes so much out of you. And this is just what I've learned from people that have done the programs. But there's always this purpose behind. Like you have to have a very good purpose of going through
Mhm.
all of this process. And then afterwards, then you stick with it because if you don't, you just kind of in and out, and sometimes you don't finish or whatever. But
Right.
I love that. That's a really good reason. I've always told my friends like I'm not ready and I'm not at a point where I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna do it. But I also kind of feel like that's something that I've always wanted just because I feel like I can do it. But there's really not a lot of other like actual reasons other than just like I want to. And I feel like
That's enough.
also because I like my parents immigrated here, and I'm like, I feel like it would be a good way to honor like what their sacrifices. And it's something that I've always wanted. I've always loved school.
Mhm.
And Because I know that I heard somebody say that like your doctorate sometimes it's not really about learning anything specifically that you're going to do in the field. It's just doing the research and it's something that you may never even do. So I don't know. There's all kinds of different experiences with doctorate. For you, did you have like what was your thesis on? How was that process for you? If you want to share with us.
Oh man, so this is really funny. I did my dissertation. Mind you, I chose my dissertation topic prior to the pandemic. Okay, but I was writing in pandemic times. And I actually failed my first class that I've ever failed, like in my entire life, like during. So you can fail a class and still get your PhD, just saying. Um, but yeah, the pandemic was rough, but the I chose my topic on remote employees. I was always interested in remote work, even before. And so I looked at cyber loafing or cyber slacking, which is like, using other things on your computer online while you're working, watching Netflix, texting, social media, online shopping, reading the news, whatever. All of those things fall under cyber loafing, cyber slacking. So I was looking at cyber loafing and slacking, technology stress, and remote employees during the pandemic. I was not planning on including the pandemic in my dissertation, but yeah, global pandemic had other plans. So that was part of my paper as well. But I did not struggle with finding people for doing my study. So that was good.
So the timing was just, I mean, as bad as it may sound, but the timing was perfect for you. It sounds
Yeah.
like it kind of
Yeah.
worked out.
The one benefit, right? Well, and that and our ability to work remotely
Mhm.
more. Yeah.
So are you pro allowing people to work remotely, or what was it that you found?
What I found is that the flexible workplace is always the best option for people. There are people that work really well at home, and there are other people that don't.
Mhm.
And so giving people the flexibility in choice and the ability to choose, between that and not. I've been on both sides
Mhm.
now. I currently work, I mean, obviously I worked in person, a lot of my clinical career, um, my whole clinical career. But I worked remote for the first consulting firm that I worked for. My team was based in Minneapolis and then in Wisconsin. So we were all over the place, and worked with most of my clients were remote with a few like in-person visits, but very short amount of times. And then now I still work remote with my client who's on the East Coast, but I have an office that I can go into. So there's social events. And if I'm not feeling productive at work, like I can, or at home, I can go, into the office a few days a week. And there are activities to keep people engaged and connected and book clubs. So as an extrovert, I'm very thankful to have that because I was getting to the point where I would like go to Target just to like socialize, see people.
Yes.
So
Yeah. I relate to that. Well, not specifically to your situation, but I moved away from New Mexico and went to Texas for a little bit and I started doing remote and then the pandemic hit. And then at that time, I think I got COVID. So I was fine. I just couldn't get out of my apartment.
Mhm.
And I think after like the 2 weeks or 3 week period that you couldn't do
Mhm.
anything, afterwards. And I'm an introvert. Like I enjoy people. I like talking to people, but then there's like time where I'm like, okay, I don't want
Yeah,
to, I
everybody.
need my time alone. And after that, I was like, I need to go somewhere and like see people. And at the time, my spouse was driving back and forth. So I had a lot of alone time in there too. And then of course, we couldn't even see each other during that time. Uh,
Mhm.
and I would do the same thing. Like I was sometimes just like drive down the street so I could like see people like from far away because I didn't want to talk to people. But then I would like go back in and just, I mean, remote work is definitely different. And you're right. I think having that independence, professional independence really does make a difference when you're able to say, okay, this is what I need today. And next week I may need to be home so I can get this done or go to an office. I think that really does make a difference. So as we get closer to the end, and I'm babysitting my sister's little kitty and he's destroying my office right now. So actionable steps for whoever, Maddie and Jamie, whoever watches this recording or hears later, what do you recommend young professionals or students that are getting ready to get into the workforce to start looking into what they want to do in the IO field? What would you recommend they do? And
Yeah.
yeah.
I feel like one of the things I'm sure there's been a lot of really great tips along the way, and I've mentioned a few things that have worked for me. I know those informational interviews are huge, and were a big part of one getting my interviews and then landing the roles that I've been in. But I would say my recommendation would be one of the things that helped me the most, because I had a lot of imposter syndrome getting into these kind of roles. And so write down, some positive statement, or some words that you need to read while you're doing, maybe these uncomfortable conversations or doing these interviews. I have them taped like all over my like office wall. Like every new occasion, I like make a new one. And so they're like pinned all over my office, and they really have helped me, transition into this field. And then even, starting my new role, it was like, okay, like, I had to write one that says, what you're talking about. It's like, yeah, I know what I'm talking about. Like, I've done this, I'm not new to this. Like, I have experience now in this area. So that's something that's helpful for me, a tip that I would recommend. But I think for you is like, what is the thing that you're avoiding doing that's uncomfortable? And I would do that, right? So is it sending out, a message to three people for an informational interview? Or is it reaching out to a person that you are connected with that works at the company that you really want to, and you're like, I don't know if I should, or it's, setting up a virtual coffee with somebody that you want to learn from or that you want to ask to mentor you. So taking that step, that's going to push you out of your comfort zone, but push you towards the goal that you're trying to get to.
Cool. And I'm writing this down because I want to share them after on LinkedIn after we're done with our conversation. But that is so true. Sometimes, especially right when you're getting out of that student role into the professional role, you can feel like, am I even qualified to do this? Should I even be applying to do this? And I think we've also talked a lot about like everything that you've ever done in your life has given you a new skill, and you have that with you, and it's in your toolbox, and you can always refer back to, even if it's like I remember one of my first jobs, like I worked at Walmart, and finding like the right wording again with knowing how to present yourself. What did I learn? What can I do very well? And how can I transfer that skill? And I think it's really cool to be able to put all that stuff together and remind yourself like, you're qualified. You've done your work, you've done your school, you've done whatever it is that has brought you to this up until this point. You can do it. And I think that's a really cool reminder. I like that. How would you recommend students go about finding the informational interviews? What did you think was helpful for you? Because a lot of times we can reach out, but not everybody responds. So when they do respond, what do you recommend for them to do?
Yeah, so really, every time in the messaging for the informational interview, I'll say I just got one in my inbox, and it's like, "Hi, can you help me get this job? If not, who else can I talk to? Like, thanks." And I was like, I'm not gonna respond to that. That's not good wording. But I really try to take an interest in and show that I've looked at, either what they're currently doing or something that they've done before. Sometimes you have the opportunities. I think I did work with Dr. Legato, who does work with SEBOC, and I think I went to one of her webinars first, and so sometimes you do have the opportunity to show an interest, take an interest in somebody and in what they're doing, and then use that, have that conversation with them, a real conversation about what they discussed or what you learned from it. I try to attend webinars, a few a month if I can, and reach out to those people and just have a regular conversation with them about what they presented on with there doesn't have to be like a next step or what you want to do afterwards. And sometimes even just having those like stake-free conversations can be good practice around what an informational interview can be. But I do like to, one, tell them, um, the thing of interest or something that you saw from them and a point of connection. What do you want from them? I want a 15-minute interview, a 30 minutes of your time. And I would love to pick your brain about XYZ, right? What are you going to ask them? What are you going to be talking about? What do you want to learn from them? And so that they know what the conversation is going to be about, they know what to respond with. And then also just like thicken your skin. So I try to put out a lot of messages to people, and they are personalized, so it is a little bit of work. But then when you don't hear back from like you only hear back from like one or two, like it's okay. Because if you just send it to one or two, like you might have just, chosen the two people that are really not going to respond, and don't take it personally. Especially if they work somewhere really cool. And also some people just don't get on LinkedIn like that. So you really don't know what the reason is. Don't take it personal. Just put your message out there and see what happens.
I love that. And I think you explained the process beautifully. That's just a really awesome way. I wish I had to talk to you before I started doing my interviews, because I think the very first ones that I had a couple hiccups, and one, because I was super nervous, and two, I didn't really know. Like, I was told do an informational interview, and of course I Googled and try to get myself prepared, but it wasn't this. So if whoever listens to this, please take notes. Because you're right, everybody's time is super valuable, especially people that are doing the dream jobs. And I think when people take the time to respond to you and they take the time to talk to you, I think the very least we can do is be prepared and know what we're going to do and how to maximize those 15-30 minutes, because it is important. It's important for you, but it's also important for them to use their time wisely and not waste that time. So what would you suggest? No. I'm not gonna ask that. What do you wish you knew before you went through this process?
That it was all gonna work out, and that, the places that you didn't end up working with or that you didn't end up getting the job, and, I found out later, like it was a good thing. Like those were gonna be 65-hour work weeks, and I didn't want that, right? So, feeling really sad or disappointed about not getting a role somewhere, realizing like, what, that was just not your path. And so I think that would have been a good message to hear early on for me, because it was just like you mentioned, not knowing what roles to apply for, not knowing like what job I even wanted to do, like, and sometimes people will talk to me now and they're like, you've got it all figured out. And it's like, oh, I was lost, like so lost. Like, don't get it twisted. Like I had no idea what I wanted to do, no idea what direction. It was like change management. I was like, okay, I'll just go this way. Like,
Sure.
but then ended up really liking it, and then I think that's really the gift of consulting too, is that you do get exposure to different roles and different people and what their jobs might be. I looked at the project managers and I was like, oh, that's kind of cool what you do. And then now I'm doing it, right? So you get different opportunities, and you get the chance to explore. But yeah, that was a tangent on, yeah, I wish I knew that those paths were just not there for me, and it all works out in the end.
That's super wise, because I feel like sometimes we want to control our path and where we go and what we do. I did not although I love psychology and I find it super interesting, I didn't want to be a counselor. And I ended up being one for like 8 years. And I never thought in my life that I would do work in addictions like that. Everything that has happened in my life, I didn't ever plan. It was just like something happened, and I was like, okay. And you do have to be open for opportunities, and you also got to be prepared. That's another thing that I always like to share with people is be prepare yourself for whenever opportunity shows up, you're not left surprised. But if you're not prepared, then that means it's not your time. And that was a really difficult lesson I learned like last year with this job that I really wanted. It wasn't my time. I was not prepared. I didn't have the skills necessary to be able to succeed. So even if I was offered the job, I don't think I would have been successful. I don't think I would have liked it. I think I would have struggled a little bit versus now that I'm in a complete different headspace, that I had experiences and I've been able to meet a lot of people that are in the industry, that I'm like, oh, okay, so I know what to expect. I'm not naively just walking into a position thinking, oh, it's going to be all rainbows and flowers. It's actually not. Consulting is hard work, and you do have to be organized, and you have the time management has to be on point, and a lot of things that I didn't even think about last year. So definitely accepting things as they happen can be a challenging lesson, but I think it's one that we all got to learn, because I believe in destiny, and things happen for a reason, and you're put in a place where when you're supposed to be there, and you just can't fight it. It's not your time. It's not your time, and that's ugh, a tough one to learn, but a necessary one.
100%. Yeah.
So what do you do now to help you take care of yourself? What do you like to do? Because I know consulting can be a lot of brain work and a lot of mental work. So how do you spend your spare time, and what do you like to do?
Yeah. I mean, I would argue my work was harder when I was in the clinical field. And now this is like relaxing and chill. And there are the busy times, where you do have a lot of face to face and more people interactions. But for the fun and relaxing time, I mean, I do enjoy that I get to work remote, and I do get to cook at home, which I love cooking, and baking and making, delicious food. And I feel like I have more of that opportunity with the job that I have. I also have a garden plot, so like I like to get out and garden for food to eat. And yeah, I have like so many plants. Let me see if I take my little, so many plants. Um, Crazy plant lady. So
Oh, I love it. Oh, I like that one.
yeah,
Oh,
so I've got a lot of plants like all over my house. So those are the things that I do. So if my plants look like they're struggling, then I'm probably also struggling. So it's like my visual cue of like, all right, you have too much on your plate.
yes. That's beautiful. I I'm gonna just keep up with you, because I have a lot of same interests as you do.
I
So
know, it's like I feel like Gabby and I were gonna have a little coffee after the virtual coffee after this for sure. We have to
yeah,
talk. I used to work in substance abuse too. It was like my first roles before crisis. So yeah, yeah,
awesome. That's
right
super
there.
awesome. I did when I worked in at a I started in corrections, and then I was like, I this is not for me, the way that mental health
Yeah,
treatment and
hard
correct.
system to work in. Yeah.
Oh my God. So I was like, nope. And then I went to a trauma-informed agency, and that just blew my world. I mean, it rocked my world. And then we used to do a lot of crisis-centered work with the residential teams.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So that was amazing. And then I moved around and ended up working with just adults. And right now I'm still I'm not going to say a volunteer because I'm getting paid, but I do part-time supervision for a local community here. A
Okay,
drug
nice.
coalition. Yeah, so that I'm still like in
Yeah,
that world.
you
I
got your
can't
toe
seem
in
to,
there, yeah.
yeah, I can't seem to leave it. And I'm like, I don't want to do this work, but then I just never leave. So it's
Yeah.
just in my heart now.
Yeah. Well, most of my like consulting clients are in like the nonprofit space. So it's been nice to, I always joke that I only like partially sold my soul to corporate.
Mhm.
because I still get to work with my people and at least help support them. So,
That's beautiful. Awesome. Okay, well, I want to be very respectful of your time. I know we started a little bit, a couple minutes late. So, is there anything else you want to share with us that maybe I failed to ask or just we didn't get to chat about before we end?
no, been great questions, great interviewing. I always like to put it out there if anybody wants to continue the conversation or have any questions about consulting. Open door, and you don't have to do, actually, you can just write a little statement about how you liked our conversation today. And it's an easy opener for you, but you can find me on LinkedIn. Actually, let me add, I'll drop my LinkedIn in here so you can find me easy.
Oh, Jamie, I'm so sorry. I just saw your comment. Yes, these are gonna be on this SEBOC.com website. Let me put the link as well. And then you'll be able to see all the other conversations as well. And they may not be up there just yet because I know they were making all these conversations into a podcast-ish something. So if you, Jamie, if you want to drop your LinkedIn, I'll follow you, and then once I find it, I'll send it over. Or message me on
Here, I
LinkedIn.
have Jamie's LinkedIn because she just added me.
Oh, perfect. Okay. Awesome. Thank you. Okay, so then I'll do that. Because I should have checked. I haven't checked yet, but I'll send it. I'll find it and I'll send it to y'all. But okay, cool. All right. Well, this conversation was super good, and I feel like we definitely should have another coffee chat after this because
Uh-huh,
we have a
100%.
lot in common. We have a lot in
Similar
common.
path.
Yes. And I hadn't met anybody who with a clinical background yet. And I've interviewed a couple people and a lot of, well, we've done like 4 consultants up until, and then a couple academic, and then some business. So we've had a little bit of a different diversity of backgrounds and all that good stuff, but this is cool. All right. Well, I'm going to stop talking now. Yay. Awesome.
Oh, look at that. Social work. There you go.
Oh my God. We are going to be friends now.
Uh-huh.
I'm
Yeah.
excited.
And if you have any questions on the transition, I got you.
Yes.
It was
Yes.
rough, but we made it.
And that's probably like the best feeling. Like once you accomplish and you get to where you want to be, you're like,
Yeah.
okay. Because that's literally how
Mhm.
I felt with this job. I'm like, man, it felt like for a long time, like I was doing all this random things and then it all comes together. Yes.
Yes, the change in, yeah,
Mhm.
no, the change in language, I'm like I said, I just had that conversation like 2 days ago. Like
Mhm.
you managed a portfolio. I was like, managed a portfolio. Got it. Like,
Mhm. Mhm. Yep. Yep.
and
And
then the
that's
language changes from one firm to the other. So it's like, yeah.
And it's interesting because you like with the clinical background, you'd never say, yeah, I had a portfolio of clients. Like you just say I had a caseload.
Mm-hmm.
Caseload, we know what that means, but it is interesting that and that's good that they were able to give you that feedback.
Mm-hmm.
And that's gonna propel you forward. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for making the time to be with us. I know you're busy and I will reach out. And Jamie, if you want to join us in another conversation, please, Maria, y'all are more than welcome to come back in 2 weeks. We're going to have another conversation. And I cannot remember who I'm interviewing next week, but next 2 weeks. But yeah, come back
I'm
and then we'll figure it
surprised.
out together. Yeah, be surprised. Just be surprised with me.
Uh-huh.
Um, but all right, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you, Rachel, again. And we'll
Meet you
see you
all.
in touch.
All right. Take care. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.